HOA charged me $500 for unauthorized fishing? Now they have to pay me to use the lake. That's exactly what happened to me, thanks to a petty HOA president named Karen. But guess what? I didn't just fight back. I turned the tables so hard, now the HOA has to pay me if they want to use the lake. Stick around, because in this video, I'm telling the full story of revenge, legal battles, and how I turned a simple fishing trip into a complete HOA meltdown. Before we dive in, hit that like button if you've ever been bullied by an HOA, and make sure to subscribe for more crazy real-life neighborhood stories. You ever have one of those moments where you realize you're paying money to live somewhere that feels less like a neighborhood and more like a dictatorship? Yeah, that was me. I moved into Lakeshore Estates 3 years ago. Nice place, clean yards, quiet neighbors, big lake at the end of the street that sparkled at sunset. Looked like something off a postcard. When I bought my house, the realtor told me the lake was community access, which basically meant anyone in the neighborhood could walk down, cast a line, or take a kayak out as long as you followed the posted rules. Simple. I'd grown up fishing with my granddad, so that lake became my weekend escape. Every Sunday morning, before the neighborhood woke up, I'd grab my thermos, my old rod, and head down to the dock. Just me, the water, and the sound of birds. No drama, no problems. Until Karen showed up. Every HOA story's got one, right? That person who thinks the letters HOA stand for head of all. Karen moved in 6 months ago. Blonde bob haircut, clipboard glued to her hand, and a smile that looked like it was practiced in the mirror. Within 2 weeks, she was elected president of the HOA after the last guy moved to Florida. And from that moment on, the peace around Lakeshore Estates ended. She changed everything. No garbage cans visible for more than 6 minutes after pickup. No backyard sheds unless painted in approved HOA beige. No American flags unless they were tastefully sized. Yeah, I wish I was kidding. But the real problem started the morning she caught me fishing. It was a calm Saturday, sun just peeking through the trees. I was standing on the dock, lying in the water, sipping coffee. Then I heard the unmistakable click, click, click of heels on wood. I turned, and there she was, arms crossed, clipboard ready for combat. "Good morning," I said. "Beautiful day for—" She cut me off. "Sir, you're not authorized to fish here." I blinked. "Authorized? I live here." She tapped her clipboard. "According to HOA records, you haven't purchased a community fishing permit." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "A what?" She adjusted her sunglasses. "As of last week, the HOA board voted to implement a new lake access policy. Residents must now obtain a permit for any recreational use of the lake. Fishing, boating, swimming, anything." I stared at her. "You mean I have to pay to fish in the lake I already pay HOA dues for?" She smiled that smile, the one that says she's about to ruin your day. "Exactly. It's a $250 annual permit. And since you've already violated the rule, I'll be issuing a $500 fine for unauthorized activity." I laughed out loud. I couldn't help it. "You're kidding me." Her pen didn't stop moving. "No, I'm not. You'll receive notice in the mail within 3 business days. Have a nice day." And then she turned on her heel and strutted off, like she just saved the community from a criminal. I stood there stunned, fishing rod still in hand. $500 for fishing. Sure enough, 3 days later, there it was, in my mailbox, an official-looking letter with the HOA logo at the top. "Violation, unauthorized lake usage, fine amount $500, payment due 14 days. I nearly tore it in half, but instead I took a breath, sat down, and read the whole thing. The new
policy had been voted in by Karen and 2 board members, both of whom she'd handpicked. It claimed the HOA now managed the environmental sustainability of the lake and that exclusive access was necessary to preserve natural balance. Translation, Karen found a new way to squeeze money out of people. But here's the thing. That lake wasn't owned by the HOA. It sat just outside the recorded boundary line, which meant it technically belonged to whoever held the deed on it. I didn't know who that was, but I was about to find out. The next morning, I went down to the county records office. The clerk was an older guy named Bill, real friendly, smelled like coffee and sawdust. "Hey, Bill, you happen to know who owns the lake behind Lakeshore Estates?" He typed for a second, then frowned. "Huh. Looks like it's been under private ownership since the 80s. A company called Fairmont Development went under years ago. The property's been inactive. No taxes paid, no transfers." "So who owns it now?" He smiled. "Technically, whoever buys it next." That got my gears turning. "Wait, so it's for sale?" He shrugged. "Well, it's county-liened. Someone could clear it by paying off the back taxes."
How much are we talking? He flipped through the file. $23,782. I let out a low whistle. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't impossible either. "Let me get this straight," I said. "If I pay those back taxes, I own the entire lake?" Bill nodded. "That's how it works, son. You'd own the land, the water rights, the access, all of it." By the time I drove home, my mind was spinning. $500 for a fishing fine, or 23 grand to make sure no one could ever find me again. I ran the math. Between my savings, a small personal loan, and selling my old truck, I could cover it. And honestly, the satisfaction alone would be worth it. That night, I signed the paperwork. And 2 weeks later, I officially owned the lake. I'll never forget the day the deed arrived. Big envelope, official county seal. It said, "Owner of record, Mason Carter. Property, Lake Fairmont. 24.6 acres of surface water and shoreline." I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. The first thing I did was head down to the dock, the same one Karen had fined me for using, and hammered up a brand new sign. "Private property. Access by owner permission only." And right underneath, I wrote in sharp black letters, "HOA members welcome. Day pass, $100. By evening, Karen showed up. She must have heard about the sign within an hour. She marched down the hill like a storm, waving a sheet of paper. "You can't just claim the lake, Mason." "I didn't claim it," I said, holding up the deed. "I bought it." Her jaw actually dropped. "You what?" I handed her a copy. Filed, sealed, and recorded. "You're standing on my shoreline." She stared at the document like it was written in another language. "You can't do this, Mason," she said finally. "I can, and I did." She crossed her arms. "The HOA bylaws give us authority over shared natural resources within the community boundary." I grinned. "Read it again. Your boundary ends 20 feet before the lake. You've got no claim here." Her face turned red. "You'll regret this, Mason." "Maybe, but it won't cost me $500. The next HOA meeting was legendary. Half the neighborhood showed up, angry, curious, or both. Karen stood at the front ranting about rogue residents and illegal acquisitions. I waited until she finished, then stood up and held the deed over my head. "Ladies and gentlemen, as of 2 weeks ago, this lake belongs to me. Not the HOA, not the board, me. And anyone who wants to use it is welcome, for a small access fee." You could hear the gasp from the back row. Karen slammed her notebook shut. "This is outrageous." A man stood up. "So, wait, you mean we have to pay you to use the lake?" "Sure do," I said. "Think of it as karma tax." Even Karen's closest supporters couldn't help but laugh. By the end of that week, half the HOA had canceled their lake permits. Karen tried to issue warnings, but no one listened anymore. And just like that, the power sheet built started to crumble. Meanwhile, I started upgrading the lake. Added benches, cleaned up the shoreline, built a small dock extension for paddle boats, even put up lights for night fishing. People from outside the neighborhood started coming too, paying full price. Turns out, folks love a good underdog story. Every time someone handed me cash, I couldn't help but smile, because all I could think about was that fine, that ridiculous $500 piece of paper that started it all. Now the HOA didn't just lose control of the lake, they were paying me to use it. But I wasn't done yet, because if there's one thing I've learned about HOAs, they don't take humiliation lightly. And something told me Karen wasn't finished fighting. She'd just gone quiet. Too quiet. And quiet Karens? Those are the dangerous ones.
You know that feeling when things are too quiet? Like you can almost feel a storm building, even when the sky's clear? That was the neighborhood for the next few weeks. After I posted my private lake sign, everything went weirdly silent. Karen stopped patrolling, no more HOA notices on my door, no more meetings called to discuss community safety. Just silence. And in a place like Lakeshore Estates, silence doesn't mean peace. It means plotting. One afternoon, I was fixing the small dock, tightening the bolts, sanding a few planks, when my neighbor Pete wandered down, hands in his hoodie pockets, looking nervous. Pete's one of those quiet guys, ex-Navy, early 40s, always polite, never gossipy. So when he looked spooked, I knew something was up. He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Mason, you might want to know something. Karen's been holding board-only meetings. No residents allowed. My wife overheard her at the coffee shop bragging about some compliance action she's planning against you." I wiped my hands on a rag. "Compliance action? What is that supposed to mean?" He shrugged. "No idea, man, but she said something about calling in environmental inspectors. Sounded official." "Environmental inspectors? For what?" He gave me a look. "For your lake." That night, I sat on my porch staring out at the water. The moonlight rippled across the surface. It looked peaceful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was about to pull something dirty. And sure enough, the next morning, 2 white SUVs pulled up near the lake. Out stepped 3 guys in matching khaki uniforms with clipboards and shiny name tags that said Environmental Review Division. I walked down to greet them. "Morning," I said. "Can I help you folks with something?" One of them, tall, slick hair, attitude of a bureaucrat, nodded politely. "Mr. Carter, we are here to conduct a scheduled inspection. We've received reports of potential contamination issues at this body of water." I blinked. "Contamination? From what?" He flipped through his papers. "It says here, chemical runoff from maintenance equipment, unpermitted shoreline modifications, and possible waste disposal violations." I laughed out loud. "Buddy, this is a fishing dock and a picnic bench. What chemicals are you talking about? Coffee?" He didn't laugh. "Regardless, we're obligated to inspect. Do you grant access to your property?" I folded my arms. "Sure, but I'd like to know who reported it." He smiled thinly. "Anonymous complaint." Of course. I watched as they walked the shoreline, snapping photos, scooping water samples, jotting down notes like they'd found a crime scene. Karen stood on the hill the whole time, pretending to walk her dog, watching every move. She wasn't even hiding it. I wanted to yell something up the hill, but I didn't. Not yet. Because I knew something she didn't. See, I'd already done my own due diligence after buying the lake. The county had no restrictions, no contamination history, and no environmental violations on file. Which meant, whatever these guys were looking for, they weren't going to find it. And if they were pretending to find something, well, that was about to backfire.
A week later, I got another envelope, but this one wasn't from the HOA. It was from the County Environmental Office. Inside was a report. It said, "Following inspection, no contamination, runoff, or illegal dumping found. Property in full compliance with county regulations." And at the bottom, it had a little note handwritten by the inspector himself. "P.S. Nice dock. Keep up the good work." I grinned so wide I almost hurt my face. But I didn't just want to enjoy my victory quietly. No, not this time. I printed out copies of the clean inspection report and pinned one right next to my lake sign, in big, bold letters. Officially inspected, clean, legal, and privately owned. And just beneath that, I added another line. Compliments to HOA for their concern. Access fee, $150 per day. Yeah, I raised the price because petty times call for petty measures. By sunset, Karen came storming down the path again, face redder than the no parking signs she loved putting up. "You think this is funny?" she snapped. I leaned against the post. "A little." "You?" She jabbed a finger toward the report. "You made a mockery of the board." "Karen," I said calmly, "you tried to frame me for polluting a lake that you don't even own." "I didn't—" "Oh, come on. Who else would file an anonymous complaint about environmental issues at a lake behind your biggest rival's house, the Easter Bunny?" Her lips tightened. "You can't prove anything." "I don't need to, because the county just proved me clean." She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "You may have won this one, Mason, but trust me, the HOA isn't done with you." I smiled. "Good, because I'm just getting started." Now, if this were any other HOA, maybe that would have been the end. But Karen had something I didn't know about. A lawyer friend on the board. A few weeks later, I got another letter, this one certified, thick envelope with a stamp that said, HOA Legal Advisory Notice. I opened it up and read, "Dear Mr. Carter, it has come to our attention that your use of the property known as Lake Fairmont may interfere with community easement rights established under the Lakeshore Master Covenant. The HOA demands cessation of all exclusive commercial activities pending board review." Translation? They wanted to shut me down. I laughed out loud. Commercial activities? You mean letting neighbors fish for $20 a day? I knew exactly what they were trying to do. Scare me with fancy words and lawyer letters. But here's the thing. I'm not easily scared. So I called my buddy Troy. He's a real estate attorney, the kind who wears cowboy boots to court and doesn't take crap from anyone. I said, "Troy, you busy?" "Not if it involves sticking it to an HOA," he said. "What's up?" I sent him a photo of the letter. He called me 5 minutes later, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "Man, they don't even have easement rights on that property. They're bluffing. You own every square foot of that shoreline. The only easement in their documents ends right where the storm drain hits the curb." "So what do?" I asked. He chuckled. "You don't do anything. Let them take it to court if they're dumb enough. But if you really want to have fun, start charging season passes." I took his advice. The next morning, I updated the sign again. Lake Fair access, season pass, $600, HOA residents only. By the end of the week, I had 19 people signed up. Even more were messaging me privately, asking if they could bring family and guests. It wasn't about the money, though, believe me, it helped. It was about the principle. Every dollar I earned was another reminder that Karen's $500 fine had turned into the dumbest decision she'd ever made. But then she pulled her next move, and this one, I'll admit, actually got me nervous. One morning, a tow truck showed up outside my driveway. Big rig, flashing lights, a guy in sunglasses waving a clipboard.
I walked out, confused. "Can I help you?" He looked at me. "You Mason Carter?" "Yeah." He pointed at my pickup. "Got an order to tow this vehicle. Says it's in violation of HOA vehicle storage policy." I blinked. "Storage policy? It's parked in my own driveway." He shrugged. "Just doing my job, man." I looked closer. The paper said the order came from the HOA board, claiming I'd left an unregistered vehicle in visible view. It was registered. I drove it every day. And that's when it hit me. They were trying to harass me, piece by piece, until I snapped. I told the tow guy, "Don't even think about touching it. You try to move that truck, I'll call the sheriff." He sighed, clearly not thrilled to be in the middle of it. "Honestly, buddy, I don't blame you. I'll mark it as disputed." He drove off. 2 hours later, I marched straight into the HOA office, a little portable trailer behind the clubhouse, and slammed the letter down on Karen's desk. "You're done," I said. She looked up, pretending to be innocent. "Excuse me? You're abusing your authority. First fake fines, then fake inspectors, now towing attempts. You've crossed the line." Her smile didn't even flicker. "I'm simply enforcing community standards." "No," I said, leaning forward, "you're enforcing your ego." She met my eyes. "You really think you can defy this board forever, Mason? We can make your life miserable." I smiled, calm as ever. "You already tried. Didn't work." Then I dropped the deed copy on her desk. "And you know what the funny thing is, Karen? Every dollar you spend fighting me is coming from HOA dues, which means all these nice neighbors you keep trying to control are the ones funding your losing battle." Her smile faltered for just a second. Then I turned and walked out. By summer, the lake was busier than ever. Kids swimming, couples kayaking, older folks fishing off the dock. Everyone loved it, except Karen. She stopped coming outside altogether. The only time you saw her was through the blinds, watching like a hawk. But then something strange happened. I got a notice from the county courthouse. Apparently, the HOA had filed a civil complaint claiming I'd restricted community access to a designated common use amenity. They were taking me to court. I sat there staring at the paper, shaking my head. They were actually doing it. Karen had pushed her grudge so far, she dragged the entire HOA into a lawsuit just to try to take my lake. But what she didn't realize was I was ready for her this time. Because I had a lawyer. I had the deed. I had the environmental report. And most importantly, I had every neighbor who had ever been burned by her ridiculous rules. This wasn't just a fight over water anymore. This was about freedom from HOA tyranny. So I called Troy and said, "Looks like it's time for court." He laughed. "Good. I've been waiting to bury an HOA." The next few weeks were chaos. Karen printed flyers calling me a community disruptor. She started Facebook posts about unethical profiteering. And she even had her board members knocking on doors trying to convince neighbors not to testify for me. But guess what? It backfired because people had finally had enough of her nonsense. They started calling me the lake guy. One even made T-shirts that said, "Free the lake, fire the HOA." I didn't plan it. I didn't even ask for it. But somehow, the lake had become a symbol. Karen thought she could scare me with fines and rules. Instead, she united the whole neighborhood against her. And when the court date finally came, I was ready. The lake was calm that morning, mirrors still, like it was holding its breath. I stood there with my coffee, looking out at the water I now owned, thinking about how far this had gone. A $500 fine had turned into a full-blown war. But the next part, that's where everything changed. Because when Karen took me to court, she not only lost her case, she lost her entire HOA presidency. And I made sure she did it publicly.
It's funny how one small thing can spiral into something huge. All I did was fish. I didn't throw parties. I didn't blast loud music. I didn't even build anything big or flashy. Just fished. And now here I was, walking up the courthouse steps, wearing my only good suit, with a folder full of lake documents under my arm, all because an HOA president named Karen couldn't stand not being in control. The morning sun was cutting across the courthouse lawn. You could see the tension in the air. Half the neighborhood was already gathered outside, whispering, gossiping, filming. Some people nodded at me. A few gave little thumbs up. They'd seen what the HOA had been doing to me. Karen showed up right after, heels clicking like she was walking a runway, not a courtroom. Behind her were 2 board members and a slick-haired lawyer in a $1,000 suit carrying a briefcase that looked heavier than his common sense. She saw me and gave that little smug smile, the kind that said, "I've already won." I didn't say a word, just nodded. Because deep down, I already knew something she didn't. My attorney, Troy, met me at the steps. Cowboy boots, aviators, big grin. "You ready to make history?" He slapped the file in his hand. "Oh, we're ready. And judging by what they filed, they're about to embarrass themselves." We walked into courtroom 2B. It wasn't a big one. A dozen benches, 1 judge, and a whole lot of curious faces from Lakeshore Estates crammed in to watch. Even the court clerk was amused, probably already sensing it was going to be one of those days. The bailiff called out, "Case number 2025-3417, Lakeshore Estates Homeowners Association versus Mason Carter." Karen's lawyer stood, all polished confidence. "Your Honor, this case concerns the defendant's unlawful restriction of community access to shared amenities and the operation of a commercial enterprise on property held under covenant regulation." Judge McKinney, older guy, gray hair, eyes like he'd seen it all, leaned back in his chair. "Shared amenities, you say? What's the amenity in question?" "The lake, Your Honor, known as Lake Fairmont." The judge flipped through a few pages. "I see, Mr. Carter." Troy stood, calm and confident. "Your Honor, those brochures were printed by the HOA, not the county. And, as you'll see in the deed we've submitted, Lake Fairmont is not, and never has been, part of the Lakeshore Estates common area. My client purchased it outright from the previous landowner after it was excluded from the HOA development plan." The judge's eyebrows went up. "You have the deed?" "Yes, Your Honor, right here." He handed over a certified copy. The judge looked at it for seconds, then glanced at Karen. "Ms. Karen, is it? This document shows the lake property isn't even listed under your HOA's jurisdictional parcel." Karen stiffened. "That must be a mistake, Your Honor. It's always been considered part of our neighborhood." Troy grinned. "Considered doesn't mean owned, Your Honor." The courtroom chuckled. Even the judge smiled. Karen's lawyer tried to recover. "Your Honor, regardless of ownership, the HOA maintains certain easement rights for community access and recreational use as outlined in our charter." The judge frowned. "Do you have documentation of that easement?" The lawyer hesitated. "We believe it's implied under the community charter." "Implied?" the judge repeated. "You're suing someone over implied access." A few people in the gallery snickered. The judge flipped another page, shaking his head. "I see no registered easement filed with the county." Troy leaned in. "Because there isn't one, Your Honor. My client had the property surveyed before purchase. The HOA's property line ends 40 feet short of the shoreline. Everything beyond that belongs to him, legally, privately, and exclusively." Karen's lawyer tried a different tactic. Then, Your Honor, we submit that Mr. Carter's operation of a commercial fishing dock violates the community's no business policy. Troy grinned again. Two problems with that, Your Honor. One, the business policy applies only to properties within the HOA, which this isn't. And two, even if it did, my client's not running a business. He's charging a usage fee for access to his privately owned property, which falls under private recreation, not commerce. The judge glanced down at the papers again. That true, Mr. Carter? I stood. Yes, Your Honor. I'm just asking for maintenance fees from people who want to use the lake, same way a private park does. I don't advertise. I don't sell anything. I just keep it clean and let folks enjoy it. Karen exploded. He's making a mockery of the community. That lake defines our neighborhood. The judge leaned forward, voice calm but sharp. Ma'am, please refrain from interrupting. You'll have your chance to speak. She huffed, crossing her arms like a kid told she couldn't have dessert. The hearing went on for another hour, but it was all the same. The HOA throwing empty claims, Troy dismantling them piece by piece. At one point, Karen's lawyer brought up the environmental inspection. He said, there are also reports of contamination and unlicensed shoreline alterations. Troy smirked again. Yes, and the county cleared my client of all those accusations. We've submitted that report as evidence. He handed it over, and the judge read it, chuckled, then said, Who filed the initial complaint? Karen's lawyer hesitated. It was anonymous. The judge gave a small laugh. Right. Anonymous. The courtroom broke into quiet laughter again. Even the clerk covered her mouth. Finally, the judge sat back and said, All right, I've heard enough. He looked at Karen's lawyer. You're asking this court to recognize an HOA's authority over land it doesn't own, doesn't have an easement for, and doesn't maintain, correct? The lawyer nodded weakly. Yes, Your Honor. The judge turned to Troy. And you're saying your client legally purchased the property, pays taxes on it, and maintains it independently of the HOA. Correct, Your Honor. The judge sighed. Then this case is pretty simple. He banged his gavel lightly. Case dismissed. With prejudice. The HOA has no jurisdiction or claim over the property known as Lake Fairmont. All fees or fines levied against Mr. Carter by the HOA are void. Then he looked at Karen. And I suggest, ma'am, that your board stop wasting community funds on personal vendettas. The room erupted. Neighbors clapped. Someone actually whistled. Karen looked like she was about to faint. I tried not to smile, but I couldn't help it. After months of harassment, lies, and threats, justice had just slapped her across the face. Troy patted me on the shoulder. Told you, easy win. But we weren't done yet. Outside the courthouse, reporters from the local news, apparently someone tipped them off, were waiting. Mr. Carter, is it true the HOA fined you $500 for fishing? One asked. I nodded. Yep. And now they have to pay me if they want to fish. They laughed. Cameras flashed. Karen tried to storm past, barking at her lawyer, but someone shouted, Hey, Karen, how's the lake? She glared daggers at me. That's when I said it, maybe the pettiest line of my life. Clean, private, and HOA free. The crowd roared. That night, I sat by the lake again. Same old spot where this all began. The water was calm, crickets chirped. It felt different now. Not just because I'd won, but because it was over.
For the first time in months, I could finally relax. And as peaceful as it was, I knew Karen wasn't done. See, people like her, they don't accept defeat easily. They regroup, they plot. And a few days later, that theory was proven right. It started with whispers again. Pete came by the dock. "You hear about the meeting?" "What meeting?" I asked. "Emergency HOA vote. Karen's pushing to raise dues to cover legal expenses. Word is she's blaming you for bankrupting the association." I blanked. "She's what?" He nodded. "And she's calling for a new rule banning lake-related activities for all residents, even off HOA property." I almost dropped my coffee. "She can't do that." He shrugged. "When has that ever stopped her?" That evening, I pulled up the HOA's community site. Sure enough, there it was, a notice for a special session vote. And right below it, a line that made my blood boil. "Due to ongoing disruptions and disputes regarding lake access, the HOA will vote to restrict all recreational lake usage pending new guidelines." She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. This wasn't about the lake. It was about punishing me and everyone who'd sided with me. So I did what any rational person with a grudge and a sense of humor would do. I planned a party. The next weekend, I hosted what I called the HOA Free Fish Fest. Free food, live band, boat rides. Invitations sent to every resident, even the ones who'd been scared to talk to me before. By noon, the whole shoreline was packed. Kids playing, music echoing, people laughing for the first time in ages. And then came the cherry on top. A banner hanging over the dock that said, "This is what freedom looks like." Karen showed up halfway through, red-faced and furious. "You can't do this," she yelled over the music. "Doing it right now," I said. She pointed at the crowd. "You're violating community guidelines." I grinned. "Not on HOA property, I'm not." Then I looked around, raised my cup, and shouted, "Who here is tired of HOA drama?" The crowd cheered so loud she actually flinched. And that's when I saw it, the moment she realized she'd lost more than a lawsuit. She'd lost her power. A few days later, I got another knock on the door. Pete, again, smiling this time. "You won't believe this," he said. "Karen resigned." I blinked. "What?" "Yeah, the board voted her out. They're appointing someone new. Whole neighborhood celebrating." I didn't say anything for a second. I just looked past him, out at the lake. It was calm again. Peaceful. Free. For the first time in months, there were no letters, no threats, no fake inspections. Just the sound of the wind through the trees, and the faint laughter of neighbors enjoying the place they'd once been too scared to use. The HOA still existed, technically, but it was different now. No more tyranny, no more Karen. And as for the lake, well, let's just say it finally belonged to the people who deserved it. But the story doesn't end here. Because when a new president took over, something unexpected happened. Something that changed the entire neighborhood forever. Let's just say they came knocking on my door this time. And what they offered? Well, you want to hear this next.
By the time the HOA realized what I'd done, it was already too late. My new Lake Access LLC had become an official registered entity with a lease and usage agreement filed with the county. Every property deed in the HOA was legally bound to the community's amenities, which included, the lake. That meant every single one of them needed permission from me to use it. I wasn't trying to be spiteful. At first, I thought maybe I could just teach them a lesson about fairness and boundaries. But when I walked into the next HOA meeting, ready to have a civil conversation, I realized these people had no intention of backing down. Karen sat at the head of the table like she was the queen of the county, tapping her manicured nails on the stack of papers in front of her. Well, look who decided to show up, she sneered as I walked in. The self-proclaimed lake owner. I stayed calm. Not self-proclaimed, legally recognized. Here's the paperwork. I set down a folder from the county assessor's office, complete with stamped documents, survey maps, and the lease transfer. Karen didn't even look at it. She just rolled her eyes. We'll see what our lawyer says about that. Oh, I'm sure you will. But in the meantime, any HOA members using the lake will need a permit from me or my company. It's all spelled out in this notice. I handed copies to each board member. The room fell silent. A few of them started reading. You could tell they were realizing this wasn't a bluff. Wait, said Dave, one of the quieter members. You mean we actually have to pay you now? Technically, yes, I replied. Your HOA doesn't own the lake. You never did. You leased access rights from the county, which I now control. Karen's face went pale, then red. You can't do this. This is extortion. No, it's business, I said calmly. The same kind of business you used when you fined me $500 for fishing. Remember that? The room murmured. Someone in the back muttered, "This is ridiculous." Maybe, but it's also fair. I'm offering the same deal you offered me. Pay to use the lake. Karen slammed her fist on the table. We'll see about that. And that was the moment I knew the war had officially begun. Over the next few days, things escalated fast. The HOA board sent out a newsletter claiming I was trying to privatize community resources. They called me a threat to neighborhood harmony. Karen even went door to door warning people not to pay me under any circumstances. But it didn't take long before her neighbors started questioning her version of the story. Because I hadn't actually banned anyone. I just introduced a small usage fee, $20 a month per household. It wasn't even that much. The money went to maintaining the lake, cleaning debris, stocking fish, fixing erosion along the shore. And while the HOA was busy sending angry letters, I was actually making the place better. The first weekend after I took over, I hired a local landscaping company to come out and clear the trash around the lake's edge. Old bottles, broken chairs, fishing line, it was a mess. Then I installed solar lights along the walking trail, built a small floating dock, and even added benches along the water. Within a week, the place looked better than it ever had under the HOA's so-called maintenance fund. Neighbors started noticing. People came out to walk their dogs, take pictures, or just sit by the water. "Hey man," one guy said to me while I was checking the new dock, "I don't know what all that drama is about, but this place looks great. You really did all this?" "Yeah," I said, tightening one of the bolts. "Just trying to make it nice again." He nodded. "Well, it's working. I'll happily pay that $20 if it means this keeps up." And just like that, people started signing up. Karen, of course, lost her mind when she found out. At the next HOA meeting, she was practically foaming at the mouth. "Do you realize that half the neighborhood is now paying this man directly? He's siphoning money out of the HOA." One of the older members, a retired veteran named Bill, shrugged. "Maybe if we'd managed the lake better, people wouldn't mind paying us instead." Karen glared at him. "You're supposed to be on my side." Bill just folded his arms. "I'm on the side that actually fixes things." The vote was close that night. Karen barely held on to her position as president. But cracks were forming. You could feel the shift in the room. A week later, I got a knock on my door. It was a young mom from down the street, holding her son's hand. "Hey, I'm just wanted to thank you for cleaning the lake. My kid loves fishing there. He caught his first bluegill last weekend." "That's awesome. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it." She hesitated, then asked,
Is it true the HOA is trying to sue you?" "Oh yeah," I said with a laugh. "They're threatening it at least." She sighed. "Figures. Karen just can't stand not being in control." Then she pulled out a folded check. "Here's our access fee for the year. We're with you." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about the principle of standing up to bullies disguised as community leaders. Meanwhile, Karen did go through with her threat. One morning, I got served with papers. The HOA was suing me for interference with community amenities. My lawyer, an old college buddy named Mark, laughed when he read the complaint. "They don't have a case," he said, shaking his head. "You're operating within your rights. The county records are clear. The lease is yours. They're wasting their time." Still, we had to show up in court.
The day of the hearing, Karen strutted in with 2 board members and a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The judge listened patiently as Karen's lawyer claimed I had stolen the lake and was holding the community hostage. Then it was Mark's turn. He calmly presented the deed, the lease transfer, and the original agreement showing that the HOA never owned the lake, just rented access to it. The judge flipped through the paperwork, frowned, and said, "This seems pretty straightforward. Mr. Miller, that's me, legally controls the access rights. The HOA's claim is invalid." Karen shot up. But this isn't fair." The judge gave her a flat look. "Fair or not, that's the law. Case dismissed." Her jaw dropped. The courtroom went silent except for the sound of her lawyer packing up his papers in defeat. By the next week, the HOA newsletter had a new announcement. "Lake Access is now managed by Lake Access LLC. Members must apply directly for permits." In other words, they'd officially surrendered. But I wasn't done, because while they were busy fighting me in court, I'd been working on something even bigger, a community event that would make sure everyone saw what real stewardship looked like. I called it Lake Day. It was open to anyone who wanted to come fish, swim, or grill by the water. I invited local vendors, food trucks, and even set up a little stage for live music. I didn't charge HOA members a dime. Instead, I asked for small donations for the local animal shelter. The turnout was huge. Families from all over came out. Kids were swimming, people were barbecuing, laughter echoed across the water. And right in the middle of it all, Karen showed up. She stood there, arms crossed, watching everyone having the time of their lives. "Looks like people are enjoying the lake," I said, walking up beside her. She scowled. "You think this makes you the hero?" "No," I said. "Just someone who wanted to enjoy the lake in peace. You could have been part of that, you know." She didn't answer, just turned and walked away. That night, as the sun went down over the lake, I sat on the dock I'd built and listened to the sound of crickets and laughter fading into the evening air. For the first time in months, the lake felt peaceful again. I didn't need revenge anymore. I'd already won, just by doing the right thing the right way.
It's strange how victory can feel fragile, like holding a crystal in the palm of your hand. You know it's yours, yet the smallest misstep could shatter everything. After the courtroom win, I should have relaxed. The lake was mine, the HOA was embarrassed, and Karen had been publicly humiliated. But I knew better. People like Karen don't just disappear quietly. They plot. And, sure enough, she was already scheming. A few days after the big lake day, I received an envelope with no return address. Thick, official-looking. My heart sank. I'd seen this before. Certified legal threats, HOA letters, angry memos. I tore it open. Inside was a notice for an emergency HOA vote, claiming I had violated community covenants and that the board was considering legal action to seize Lake Fairmont back from me. I laughed.
That laugh was loud, echoing across the dock. The lake shimmered as if mocking her. I called Troy immediately. They're serious. They're trying to pull a last-minute takeover. Troy chuckled. Karen never learns. Let's see how far she wants to dig her own grave. The next morning, a convoy of SUVs pulled up to the lake. Karen was in the lead, flanked by her lawyer and 2 furious board members. Her face was red with determination, or maybe rage. "You're coming with us," she spat as I opened the dock gate. "This lake belongs to the HOA. You can't hide behind deeds and inspectors forever." "Funny," I said, "because the deed says otherwise, and the county agrees with me." She waved her hand, and her lawyer stepped forward. "We filed an injunction. You cannot restrict HOA access." I smiled and leaned on the dock railing. "Restrict? I'm offering access. Paid access. And the county approved that arrangement weeks ago. You're welcome to pay like everyone else." Karen's lip curled. This isn't over. Over the next 2 days, the HOA launched every tactic they could. Anonymous complaints to the county about illegal dock expansion, notices to neighbors claiming I was hoarding water rights, even sending a couple of local reporters to investigate supposed violations. But none of it stuck. Every complaint was debunked immediately. Every reporter left shaking their heads at how petty the HOA had become. Meanwhile, my lake community continued to thrive. Families paddled, fished, and picnicked. Kids built sandcastles. Couples kayaked at sunset. Even the skeptical neighbors who had once whispered about me now waved and smiled. Karen, on the other hand, was losing it. Her control was slipping like sand through her fingers. It all came to a head one morning when I got a call from an unexpected source. "Mr. Carter," said a stern voice, "this is Officer Ramirez from the County Sheriff's Department. We're investigating a formal complaint filed by Karen Henderson regarding potential misrepresentation of property ownership." I raised an eyebrow. "She's suing me again?" "Well, technically she tried to, but there's something you should know. She submitted multiple documents that contradict each other. We're classifying it as fraud investigation. She could face fines and possibly criminal charges if the discrepancies hold." I leaned back in my chair, stunned. "Wait, she's going to get in trouble?" "Yes," Ramirez confirmed. "And since the lake ownership records are solid, you're fully protected. But I'd be cautious. She's desperate." That afternoon, Karen came back, storming down the path, with her lawyer trailing behind like a whipped dog. "You're ending this today," she yelled. "You will relinquish Lake Fairmont to the HOA immediately, or we escalate this to the state." I calmly took a cup of coffee from the table and sipped. "You're aware I own it outright, right? And the county records back me up. You don't get to escalate anything, Karen. Anything you file at this point is just paper that proves how far you're willing to go to lose." Her face went redder. "I don't care. I will ruin you." I tilted my head. "Go ahead. I've been waiting for this." That night, Karen and her lawyer tried one last desperate move, filing an emergency motion in court to claim the lake was a shared community asset. I got the notice while relaxing by the fire pit I had built. I handed it to Troy. He scanned it, laughed, and said, "Oh, this is beautiful. They literally just admitted they know you own it, but they're trying to redefine reality. Let's file a counterclaim, misrepresentation and abuse of power. We'll include evidence of false filings, contradictory statements, and harassment." I grinned. Do it. Within days, the counterclaim was filed. Karen's move had backfired spectacularly. Then, the emails started. From the HOA board members, "Karen has been removed as president." From neighbors, "Thanks for standing up. The lake is ours."
from local reporters. This is officially one of the most dramatic HOA stories we've seen in the county. Mind if we feature you? Even Karen's lawyer sent a curt note. Your counterclaim is strong. They want to settle. I didn't respond immediately. I let them sweat. A week later, Karen finally showed up at my dock, alone this time. No lawyer, no entourage. Just her. You win, she spat. I resign. I'll never touch this lake again. I smiled, leaning against the railing. You mean the lake that legally belongs to me? Yes, she muttered. And the HOA? They're dissolving the board. They're electing new leadership. Good, I said. Maybe now they'll run things properly. She hesitated. You could have let us keep some access. I shook my head. I didn't take anything from you. I just enforced what was mine. You took my fishing privileges and tried to fine me $500 for enjoying my property. I guess now you understand what that feels like. Karen looked down, defeated. The final blow came when the county issued a formal reprimand for the HOA. Due to repeated false claims, harassment of property owners, and submission of conflicting documentation, the Lakeshore Estates HOA is subject to dissolution unless they restructure and comply fully with county regulations. In other words, Karen had destroyed her own organization. The news went viral in the neighborhood. People were laughing, posting memes, joking about Karen versus the lake. Even a local radio station called to interview me. The first neighborhood meeting after Karen's removal was wild. New board elected, lake access permanently recognized under my management. HOA members voted to approve the lake as a recreational asset under my control, with a nominal fee that went entirely to upkeep and community events. I sat quietly while the meeting happened, enjoying every second. This was poetic justice. Karen's obsession with control had led to her downfall. But the cherry on the top was completely accidental.
A local contractor I'd hired to repair docks mentioned something to a reporter friend. Funny thing, every dollar the HOA spent trying to fight Mason Carter? Total waste. They could have invested it here and had a beautiful lake. Within hours, Karen's failed lawsuits, counterclaims, and expenses were public knowledge. People were outraged. HOA members filed internal complaints demanding accountability for the wasted funds. Karen was never seen in a leadership role again. Life settled quickly after that. The lake thrived. Families came from all over. I added a small cafe by the shore, kayaks for rent, and a floating dock for sunset yoga classes. It became the community hub everyone wished the HOA had made it years ago. And every time I walked the shoreline, I smiled, knowing the victory wasn't just mine. It belonged to every neighbor who had been silenced, intimidated, or bullied by Karen and her petty obsession with control. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I stood on the dock and watched the water shimmer. I sipped my coffee. Kids laughed in the distance. Couples paddled in kayaks. Birds skimmed the water. And somewhere, I imagined Karen pacing her empty living room, realizing her fight had not just failed, it had completely backfired. It was beautiful. Not because of revenge alone, but because the lake was finally free. Free from fines, free from tyranny, free from HOA drama. And I was finally the owner of peace. Except, now I was also the ultimate authority for anyone who wanted to enjoy that water. And if anyone tried to stop it, well, let's just say the county, the deeds, and the law were firmly on my side. The moral? You can try to bully someone, fine them, harass them, or control them. But if they know their rights, and if they're willing to fight smart, and if they actually care about doing the right thing, karma has a way of turning the tables spectacularly.
Karen's obsession with petty control destroyed her reputation, her HOA, and her ego. Meanwhile, the lake? Thriving, peaceful, and legally untouchable. And every time someone asks me about that $500 fine, I just smile, because it started a chain reaction that ended exactly the way it should have. The HOA lost, I won, the lake is ours, and Karen? Well, she'll never forget it.
And that's the story of how one petty fine turned into a full-blown HOA disaster, and why sometimes standing up for your rights pays off in ways you never imagined. If you enjoyed watching Karen lose it, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more wild HOA drama and revenge stories. Comment below. If you were in my shoes, would you have fought back or just paid the $500 and moved on? Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the lake is yours, but the fight is what makes it truly yours.